Hey, thanks for joining me again. It's time for another review. It's the Glycine Combat Sub GMT blue-red bezel color, I guess. Some people, it's been known to be called the soda because they don't want to say Pepsi, but we all know basically what this color scheme is. And the reference for this specific model is GL0381. And we're going to get right into it. And let's see, Glycine's just it's a great watch brand. It's been around for a while. They make some great watches, and they have this stigma because Invicta bought them or backing them up or something like that. But other than that, they basically still make their watches in the same factory in Switzerland. And as far as I can tell, they don't really have any say in what happens with Glycine, as far as I can tell or am aware of. So Invicta is just basically backing them up financially, I believe, and that's pretty much it. So you still get really well-made watch and kind of an underdog. I don't think they get enough credit. Their Airman, which is, their GMT that they're best known for, beat Rolex to be the first commercially available, GMT watch. And I think their Combat Subs is one of the next best line for a dive watch. And I finally got one, but basically it's in a GMT version. And they have actually multiple Combat Subs now. It used to be primarily 42 millimeters, which is what I have here. They don't have any other sizes for their GMTs right now in the Combat Sub, but what they do, they made a, I think they went down to as far as a 36, which was a little bit too small, I think. I'm pretty sure it's a 36 millimeter. And then they went to somewhere right in between at a 39, which is great. And I have a blue on blue version of that, and I'll probably do a review of that at some point. But today it's on this particular model. So let's take a closer look at this. I'll pick this up. And first things first, we get this in focus. Let's go over some dimensions. The case is 42 millimeters. Some things to keep in mind, because I'm going to compare this to a recent GMT release from another, sorry about this camera knock there, from another very reputable watchmaker. Name drop Seiko. I love Seiko, but we'll get into that later. So 42 millimeter case, lug to lug should be 49.5, but as you can see, it really downturns pretty good. So this will fit a lot of wrists, and you can see it's actually lower than the case body, so it really carries it down. And you also have female end links as well, which is great. Solid end links, solid links. I believe these are pin and collar, so there should be a collar in the middle. It's not. I don't think it's a split pin. But though it kind of looks like it is. Well, it's either one or the other. But for me, it's not that hard to size, and it really shouldn't be for anybody else. If you put it with enough watches, you'll get all sorts of bracelets. And if you just want to size it yourself, which I recommend, because I don't want to pay or go out to a watchmaker just to have it sized, and they may not get it right the first time also. And if you're in a hurry, sometimes they may not center it correctly, like the way you like it on your wrist, So anyways, what's impressive is, well, we'll see, the lugs are 22, so a little bit wide, but I think it's proportional for this size watch, 42 millimeters. Although I suppose they could have gone down to as small as 20 just to slim it down, but I don't think it's really necessary. It's got its own character, and it compares pretty well to another watch. But anyways, what's impressive is the thickness. It is 11 millimeters thick, which is quite thin for a GMT watch, and a dive watch at that, with 200 meters of water resistance. And you do have a display case back as well. Fold out clasp here, and you do have this interesting little kind of flaring up, I guess, on the edge, which, you know, I think what it helps with is, you know, you get sometimes, it's probably not going to help much on this side, but you can see right here where it makes contact with the glass, it's starting to scrape it a bit and you'll get those marks. I don't know if that's the intent here. Probably it's just for you to just give you some purchase a little bit easier instead of, you know, having it too tightly to this link here to slip your finger underneath. But it also does perhaps help a little bit with a little bit less friction against the surface of this link. Maybe. But I guess it's mostly to lift it up. But I haven't, you know, otherwise it seems like a pretty standard class, but I would say this is unique. I haven't seen this on too many class of this general size and style. 4 micro adjusts, double pushers too, and I just realized that actually this fold over piece is pretty custom too. Usually it's kind of more of a rounded piece, or maybe it's slightly more angular, but this is, I mean, this is angular but in a more boxy way, which I gotta admit I didn't even notice that till I just right now. I don't know why. This is actually a different kind of shape, but anyways, than I've ever really seen. So it's not all that generic, although I think maybe the one on the other combat sub that I have might be different. It might be a little bit more generic. Anyway, sapphire crystal. It's got a cyclops. I believe it has 3 layers of AR on the underside. I mean, this is a very legible dial anyways. Let me wipe my greasy fingerprints off of this as much as I can. And sorry about the glare. I gotta get something to soften the LEDs up above. I'll try to angle it so it doesn't interfere too much. I put it in the right spot here. I guess maybe right about here. But then I get reflections on the camera. But anyways, screw down crown. It's running a Sellita. Well, they call it the what is their movement in here? GL0383. But as you can guess from the numbers, it's basically an ETA 2893-2, or probably more likely it's Sellita SW330. If it is, that would have 25 joules. Let's see, what does it say here? 25 joules, right? So it is Sellita. The ETA actually has only 21 joules. You would think maybe they'd be equal. Or perhaps people always say that ETA is better than Sellita, but I don't think so. I don't think there's a huge difference in the quality of between Swiss ETA and Sellita. And I think it'll say up in this corner, right by the balance wheel. I think right in there is supposed to read what the movement is. It's kind of hard to see, isn't it? Yeah, I think I see it's 330. So yeah, makes sense. So either way, if you had ETA, or in this case, the Sellita, they both do have 42 hours of power reserve. All right, so I mentioned 200 meters water resistant. I mean, this is a thin case, nice thin bezel, but plenty of grip. It's bidirectional, proper for a GMT 24-hour scale bezel. It is an aluminum insert, which I personally prefer. I know some people prefer ceramic or even sapphire because it's more scratch resistant, but there's just something about the sheen of aluminum bezel that's just, I think, pretty much unmatched. And yes, it may scratch and probably will and could potentially likely fade over time, but I think that's just going to give it more character. Nothing lasts forever, but as long as it doesn't completely wash out, it should be all right. But who knows how long you're going to end up keeping a watch, right? But for it to be that old, well, you'll probably just love it no matter what, right? Like an old pair of jeans, or your favorite, maybe even some sunglasses that maybe have been worn the hell out, but they're just like something that you really like to wear. There is a Lume pit in here, which is great. So you can kind of reference, I mean, the rest of this is not Lume, but if you have this at a particular spot, even in the dark, you could kind of make out maybe roughly what it is, but mainly I think this preserves, because this is a dive watch first, and I am glad that they didn't leave it as a unidirectional, ratcheting 120 click bezel, which was a cheapy way to get out. And I think maybe they're the early GMT models, as with a lot of some other ones, they just go out like that. They just leave the same clicking mechanism and just replace the bezel insert. But they didn't. At least in this model, they gave it a proper bidirectional, and it is 48 clicks, so you can do half-hour increments as well. And again, you have that pip there, so you can actually use this for some timing purposes. Probably there is some limitations onto how you can align it with said minute hand at a particular time, because you can see here, the minute hand actually happens to be kind of in between one of the settings. But for most cases, I mean, you probably give yourself maybe a little less time anyways. And so you can still kind of make out where, 5, 10, 15 minutes are by the even numbers that you see, and do the guesswork in between. Good enough. If you're going to be running, you shouldn't be running your air supply all that, or, that close to the very minute, let alone seconds. So it should be fine, but I do appreciate that. Is there a little bit of back play? Not really something I would say is back play. I mean, you can play it forward or backwards. It's just, but it does click into place. You can see the alignment is perfect. And it's plenty grippy enough. I mean, it's thin, but you grip it in the right spot and your hands isn't too, I don't know, slippery for some reason. Eating fried chicken or something, then you should be fine. And I'll point out some of the details I like. So yeah, Cyclops, not sure if it's truly a 2 times. You're looking at that size here, and it is black with a red print. And I think that's a bit of a negative, but we'll get into that later. Screw down crown. Let's get this started. It's already probably wound from just moving it, but nice pop. The subs seem to have a nice pop. You see that gasket there. It's going to have a good seal. It's very smooth wind. You probably can't even hear it. Super silky smooth. First position will change the date as well as the GMT hand. It always advances, as most 2893-2s or anything based on that kind of movement will do. Much like that new Seiko GMT, from Seiko 5 GMT, Seiko 5 Sports GMT that they have. It's basically will move and works same fashion as this, which is an office GMT. I don't like the term where you true GMT for the other kind, that where you can advance the hour hand back and forth. I think the proper term is traveler's GMT. They are both GMTs, so not one is more true than the other. So I ditched that term. But anyways, let's see here. And then, of course, last position hacks the movement, and you just set it. We'll just do a nice typical shot here, like that. Lock it down, it goes again. I'm not going to advance the date. No need, and it just locks down pretty nice. Since there's a little bit of, my OCD, I try to align it. I wish it could be right crown side up, I guess, but just like this is fine. I don't like it if it's at an angle. At least, yeah. It's just, if I can kind of fidget it, give it enough play, I don't think it's going to affect the water resistance at all. If it's not super screwed down to the very ends, it should be sufficiently water sealed. Movement is lightly decorated, if you can see that. I mean, there is some bit of texturing on the bridge, these plates over here. And, it's got the sine rotor. And that's basically it. I'm not sure if this is sapphire, but I'll just assume it is. Why not? Some people do say sapphire in the back as well, but I guess we'll never know unless I put a hardness tester on both sides and see if they come up with the same readings. What else is there? Bezel action, 40 click. These generally run closer to $900 more or less, brand new from most authorized dealers. But you can get them as low as probably closer to $600 or just under that, 5 something, depending on where you go to shop. Some gray market or online dealers on eBay. Astros is a pretty good place, although the prices fluctuate, but you can catch it sometimes on a sale. And that's about it. So I really love, if you've seen a lot of my videos in the past, I do love me a Pepsi, GMT style watch. I've owned many, and if you look at my past, there's little doubt about that. I just love the red and blue colors. Some people don't like that; they rather do the Batman. I like that too, but something about red and blue is nice to me. It pops. I like how these look like applied indices. I don't know if they're pressed through, but I would just call them applied, and because they basically look like that, they have a nice frame around it, which pop under the right lighting conditions and angle of light. You just see those frames just light up, which is pretty nice. The dial is matte. Obviously, the GMT hand is red, and I don't know if too many people do this, but you see the hand is red all the way through to the center part, which I think is unusual. I was looking at this and I was trying to remember, does anybody else do something like this? Usually they'll leave it silver or perhaps even black, but they'll either just leave the red hand, the arm, and or the triangle, or somewhere in between, but rarely do I see it painted all the way through to the back, I think. Anyways, dial's clean. I like this logo. Other than the vintage style, this just text, it's you see those on the Airmans primarily, the more vintage style ones, not the Airman 18s, 42s, base 22s. Those are a little bit more modern. They'll probably have this or the one with the kind of like has the wings, which I don't like. It's not ugly, but it's just, this is cleaner. I like it's a simple crown. Or to me, it reminds me at the top of like, the chess piece, the rook, like a castle or tower or something. I don't know, but I believe it's supposed to be a crown, but I don't like the wing one. It looks too much like an Emporio Armani logo, or is it Giorgio? Or maybe it's both. I don't know, but it doesn't chime with me. And the simple combat automatic GMT, Swiss made. What else is there? Yeah, this is a typical thing for the combat subs. It has an extra little tab, I guess, at the 12 or the top of the bezel. So I believe it not so much useful for this, but it is in line with the combat subs primarily, and I guess in the dark it just helps you feel where it kind of adds a little extra grip in a way, something a little bump for you to push and help you rotate, but it also is a marker for, I guess, especially if it's low light, to just know where the top of the counter is too, so you can also feel it in that sense. What else is there? I didn't get the measurements in the crown. Sorry, someone else had to do that, or maybe I'll do it later, but I doubt it. But it's a good sized crown, and it's got crown guards. Obviously, the finish is pretty much all brushed, which I am a fan of. I'm not really much into high polish at all, but I mean, I could do with some fine ones if they did bevel it with a high polish or something, but usually brush is just fine with me. It just you don't mind the scratches that it may accumulate over time. Like here, I don't know, something about it being already brushed and then having like a scratch on it doesn't bug me, or probably most other people, over scratches on a high polished surface. And it just gives it more of a tool watch feel, tones it down. It's not that as blingy as something with more high polish, obviously. What else is there? The positives, well, let's go over just a few of the negatives. I would say the Lume, we'll do a Lume shot at the end. Typically, they don't have the best Lume formula. I'm imagining it's probably, what is it? Did I write it down? It's just, I think most of the time don't even really specify, other than it's Super Luminova, Swiss Super Luminova. I imagine it's just some C1 grade or something. It's sufficient. It's not the brightest. Does it last long? I would say just enough, but at least probably the hands, if I recall, what will last the longest over anything else, and maybe including the Lume pip. But it's nothing amazing, but it will get you by in the dark just at the time only. The GMT function, probably not as legible because you really only have one reference point, other than if you're going to use the dial as your, you know, in your head, you don't have any markings. You're going to have to use this as your reference for a 24-hour time zone as well, which is doable. But anyways, what would I say is any negatives? I could do without the Cyclops. Never been a big fan, and some people may know it is another area for lint or fine dust or particulates to kind of collect within or around. So you might have to clean that off occasionally. On my example, it isn't lined up 100%. I mean, it's close enough. Most angles you're not going to even tell, right? When it's on wrist. And I should do a wrist shot in a moment. But yeah, you can imagine most wrist shots is you won't be able to tell. And let me just get that hand out of the way because I want to show you something else. This way to advance. Good enough. And the crown seems to lock down just fine. At least I don't recall having to, back wind it until you feel that slight kind of click, or like, where it settles into the threads kind of settle into the right spot before you want to lock it down, so you don't risk cross threading. This doesn't seem to have an issue with just getting in there and doing what it needs to do without messing itself up. So yeah, so I think, but other than that, if you're looking at it straight on, it's ever so slightly, like, I guess, clockwise. It's a little bit rotated or tilted to the, to the right. And I was at Macy's looking at some watches just to kill time. Actually, I was trying to find something to reference for another video, but they don't have jack. But I just see a Seiko Turo, which actually is one that I really like, one of the Save the Oceans with the manta. But I was looking, they have I believe they have the day and date, and then they have that candy bar. So it's basically elongated Cyclops. And I was looking at that and I was like, that's also slightly off too, which, with Seiko is not surprising. But this, well, yeah, I think it's just passable. You can just tell, just like on this corner, just below that, just ever so slightly, maybe just a tiny bit more space between that frame and the bottom of that Cyclops. If you're kind of referencing that, and the top, it should be the kind of the opposite. It's over on this corner that has ever so slightly more space between the frame and the edge of that, the top edge of that magnifier, but it's not really a huge deal. What is a huge deal is two things. Black with the red print is not the most legible. It's kind of a cool look. Some ways it kind of drops the disc or window out of view. It kind of makes it more stealthy. So it just, in some ways, it doesn't really pop out to you as it would if it was more high contrast against the black with a white background with red print or black. I wouldn't mind the red print over white. The Glycine's been known to do that, at least with their Airmans. Yeah, it's not the most legible. It's only best under good lighting, or pretty good lighting, actually. Other than that, maybe household dim levels, you kind of might struggle. And also, the Cyclops actually tends to pick up, I'm trying to move it out, but as I was wearing it on the day, I don't have to worry so much about reflection on this, but there can catch a lot of reflections in within the Cyclops itself, which against that date disc can make it even pretty much impossible to read. You can imagine right there. This is an extreme example with my lights, but even outdoors, it does seem pretty reflective. I wear glasses, and I do find that if I take off my glasses, I can actually read it better than with them on. So it is doable, but that's something to note. If this is a really important feature that you need to read a lot and easily, then this may not be for you unless you plan to swap it out, which I have thought about, but I don't know if I really want to take this whole thing apart just to change that. It's kind of grown to live with it. So I would change that, and hopefully if there's a way to, I can't realign it. I probably could, but I'm not going to try. It's so minuscule, but if that's probably the most of the negative centers around that. It would be cool if they somehow made this loomed as well, even though their loom formula isn't the best anyways, but you at least have some bit of usability for however long the loom glow lasts. Even I used to have, look back in my past, a Yamaha GMT, also Pepsi, and they kind of engraved those things, the markings out, and filled it with loom, and it was thin, but it worked, but not that well either because it's so thin. I think the latest version that they have, they opened it up a little bit more, but and the loom formula I believe is better than before. They were using some sort of green, probably something similar to this. This is a green loom, but now they're using BGW9, just actually technically not as bright as green, but depends on which green formula. If it's the old like C1, and probably the BGW will still be stronger and brighter overall. But you know, I don't mind the way it is, you know, because actually I have no use for GMT because I don't travel not nearly as much as I used to. I used to be like at least once or twice a year, but that's been a long time ago. And even if I did go overseas, I have to tell you, I don't give a crap about any other time zone because I'm just concerned with the time, the local time of where I'm at, and that's all that I look at because I don't really think about checking back in with home while I'm away or anywhere else. I don't, just the way I roll. But I just love a look of a GMT. That's all. That's why you buy it. I mean, most watches, right? You don't have to have a watch, period. Let alone any of the functionality is not necessary because everything you can do by what's recording this, which is like a smartphone, right? Timers, alarms, and all that stuff, and checking other time zones. Very easy, probably easier. Well, depends. Maybe not easier, but still fairly convenient off of a phone. But anyways, yeah, we just buy what we like pretty much for what it looks like. It's a shallow hobby. It's all based on looks. It's not. It's this feeling, you know, and there's something about this that this is cool. I mean, yeah, it's very reminiscent of a, you know, Rolex GMT Master 2, but the case is completely different. They don't make these in 42s. Their bezel is different. I dare say I think this is probably better gripping than the Rolex one, perhaps. They don't loom their bezel. This is different type font and stick markings. They have little dots. Of course, they have the Mercedes hand. This is basically like that, but without the Mercedes in it. Mercedes lets has been sort of debadged, as you could say. And a couple other things. They don't do the Cyclops objects like this. I don't even think their GMTs have 200 meters of water resistance. I believe it's 100 only, if not 150 at most. So this outperforms that. And they may be, I'm not sure about the thickness, but this is pretty darn thin. And I would say for, if you can get this closer to $500 or $600, even $600, right? You look for a sale. Full price is a bit high at almost 900, even close to 1,000 almost. You know, for some it might be worth it, but for me, I try not to pay that much since I know you should be able to get it for at least 500 or 600. Even used is fair, but you could potentially find it for new for around there. And so you can compare this. There's so many to watches you can compare this to. I would compare this to the new Seiko 5 Sports GMT. You know, they have 3 colors so far, but no doubt Seiko will bust out a whole mix of them with plenty before another year is up since its release, along with special editions, and that GMT movement will go into any other Seiko watch that they can put it in, because they're all basically based off of the same movement. So that's the exciting part of it, actually. Not necessarily the SKX body or 5KX, whatever you call it. You know, we all know it's basically an SKX style. That's cool. And it's been long waiting, but it is exciting to see what else you can put it into. An Alpinist, a Tuna, Monster, right? All the other ones, Samurais, you know, you can basically transform all into GMT models. And that could be exciting for a lot of people, especially if they're really hard up on wanting to get loving GMTs. But anyways, we're going to compare it to the Seiko 5. So, I think this is better still. Though Seiko 5 is cool and it's very good for its value and everything, but I would compare and contrast here. So Seiko 5 is 42.5 millimeter case, right? And this is 42. So it's just a little bit bigger. It's almost pushing 43, but I know Seiko generally wears smaller than stated dimensions, just the way they do their cases and everything. Nonetheless, it is still a little bit wider or bigger on the case, you know, this way. The lugs are still 22 millimeters, so that's not really much of a change there. The lug to lug on those, I'm not sure, but I do know that I'm pretty sure that the lug to lug is shorter than this. This is 49.5. Pretty sure SKXs are probably 46 or 47 millimeters, more or less. I think they're pretty short. So it does have that. But they did, because of the GMT movement, they did increase the thickness of that GMT to, I believe, 13.6. It's not crazy thick, but, you know, it is a little bit thicker, and it's not slim compared to this at 11 millimeters. Yeah. And this has 200 meters water resistance. The Seiko 5 has 100. The Seiko 5 does not have sapphire. It also has heart legs, of course, the proprietary, which actually is fine for me. But you know, comparing them, you know, everyone generally will take sapphire over heart legs any day of the week if given a chance, right? That does not have a screw down crown. This does. That only has a push pull. So there's that. Their bezel is bidirectional, but it's friction based. I've had some of their friction based bezels before, not necessarily GMT, but they're smooth. But then you don't have this, you know, this one you really will not knock out of place. That I can imagine there is a possibility for it to kind of gently move out of place because it's just friction based. But in some ways, you have that added functionality to exactly hone in that pip, I guess, if they have a pip there, they should, to exactly where the minute marker is, or maybe if you're timing it by the hour, I don't know. So you do have that infinite positionability of friction base, but I don't know, they don't have a loomed pip on their bezel. That's Seiko 5 just don't get that. Period. That was always a kind of a little niggle for me. I don't understand why. I know it's not a true dive watch, but it kind of is still a dive watch. And if you're going for that style, loom the damn pip. I don't care if I really don't use it, but I feel it's such a integral part of a dive style watch. And that pip should be loomed, even if you say it's only 100 meters. You're not going to go loom it, just loom it. So that's the thing. So, you know, you could use it as a dive timing bezel, but then, you know, again, it's not loomed. What else is there? It has 41 hours of power reserve, and I believe it's 24 joules. So it's pretty close to this, though. It's short by 1 hour of power reserve, and it's short by 1 joule in the movement. And so yeah, I mean, for what do they run? 500-ish. If you go to some places in Japan to shop, whatever the conversion rate is, certain places you can even get them for even under 400, I believe. So thereabouts. Sakura comes to mind. They're a really good place to get JDM watches or just a lot of Seikos or Japanese watches for a pretty good price. They don't necessarily ship super quick. There is some bit of delay every time I've ordered. I feel like they're getting it from some source, and then once they get it, they ship it out. I don't think they necessarily carry it. That might be why or how they're able to somehow keep the cost particularly low for a lot of the watches compared to anywhere else that I've seen. But anyways, I digress. So for a little bit more, you get a Swiss-made compared to the Seiko 5 Sports GMT, the new one. Both have heritage, though Seiko might be slightly stronger, though Glycine really should not be considered weak at all. They've got some fine pieces, but mostly focus on the combat subs or primarily the airmans. But I do like both because they do make a slim watch that hugs the wrist and super comfortable. And I think that's better too, because the Seiko cases, even though they do wear smaller, they don't curve down like this at all. They really don't curve down that much, and so you will get more gap. This, I'm telling you, unless you got super stick wrist, this will wrap around you. Even if you think 42 is a bit dominant, it won't get any. I don't believe you're going to get much, if any. You see how well this folds in too. You won't get much of plateauing off the wrist. Oh, I'm going to show you on my wrist. I got my Sellita 5303-1. This is a black dial on a gray ribbed NATO strap from Cheapest NATO. I really like these style of NATO straps. If you want a simple color but not too plain, just adding these ribs here really do a lot for just giving a little bit more visual interest. It's subtle, but it's noticeable, and I like it. Anyways, set that aside, and then we'll put this on. So this just pops out. My wrist is just, at least my left wrist that I wear watches on, is just under 7 inches. And there you go. Let's see if I can back out more. And that's what I'm telling you about. I feel, they're not the smallest wrists. They're not the biggest either. 7 inches, kind of averagey, right? For not too big, not too small, right? It's not too bad. But I do find that at least my left wrist is a bit more slender, and especially in this size, it's a bit more shallow or rounded. So this end tends to, if anywhere, tends to be the side that might have a little bit more wrist gap and something kind of funky that you just can't fix. But I learned to say screw it, just go with it. And but this, look at that. I mean, you can imagine if you have a smaller wrist, like 6.5, it'll probably work. Yeah, you might feel that this is a little bit big, perhaps, but I'm just saying it is doable if you don't mind that. It's just super, I mean, it's slim. I mean, this one's not that thick either. This one's a nice, I don't think it's much thicker than that, to be honest, even with everything, but it's comparable, but that's for another time. And there you go. I don't know. This is a good watch. It's been running pretty good. I gotta check the measurements on this, but I don't think this is more than plus 4 seconds a day, if I recall my my apps of measuring how this has been forming since I got it, which has been this must have been within the first 3 months of 2022, so not that long ago, probably 3 months, if not just slightly over that. I don't know, not that long ago. But there you go. I mean, even I can't bend my arm without hitting, but you can see on this side it you know, it goes really well. And you can imagine it's probably the same on this side. And I have this bone here too, but it's just wraps around and just it's comfortable. I've never found any hot spots or anything. And I found that to be the same case pretty much on the Airmans as well. They were really thin and they got actually pretty good wraparound on the wrist, although this is more so. The Airmans can be a bit more straight. They have a little bit of curve depending on the model, but they're not as, you know, curvy as the subs. So yeah, I think, I mean, size-wise, again, just comparing to the Seiko 5 Sports GMT, I mean, it's about the same size this way, but it's a hell of a lot thinner this way. And you got Swiss movement. The Seiko is a good movement too, I'm sure, with what it's based off of. They just added a GMT hand. But you got, I'm pretty sure, even though the Seiko is shorter, this has really good wraparound, and you know, it really eliminates a lot of the gap if that bugs you. And that's a good thing. I mean, yeah, and I think it has a more proper, you know, clicky 48 click bezel for a GMT watch. Oh, it's a little detail, like I like that silver ring that's borders between the bezel and the crystal. It's just, I don't know, that's just a feature that I like on watches. I mean, it's kind of like what's on here. You know, it has that, but it's actually marked too with you know, hour scale. It's kind of neat, but it's just something that's nice that frames that space between the bezel and the crystal. And it's just an added detail, but something about that just always looks really nice to me, instead of going straight from crystal to the bezel, which the Seiko does. You know, they don't usually have this piece here. You could probably get a bezel, aftermarket bezel, so that might simulate this. But additionally, because of that, and I personally am a fan of thinner bezels. I don't like them to be too wide and fat going around. Certain watches I can do that with, such as my Seiko, the Tuna. It's kind of designed to be kind of a more, you know, thicker, bigger wrist presence type of watch, and that's okay. I'm kind of going, you know, I'm going to play with that and go with it. But as a general rule, most of the watches that have a bezel of some sort, a lot of them rotating, I like this to be more on the thinner side than too thick. That is something that I have to say is what bugged me about. I own a lot of NTH subs. They're great, well-made watches, and if you see my channel before, I own at least 5 of them, maybe even 6. I do like them, but the thing that bugged me was I felt that the bezel, even though it's thin and flat, it's just a little bit wider and thicker than I wanted it to be. And I don't know, these are the details that kind of matter to me, and something about that just didn't ultimately play that well to me. So I don't know, I'm kind of going off now. So let's finally end this. It's getting long as my reviews usually do, because they're pretty much unscripted. I just do these when I get a chance, because I am busy as heck, work and 2 kids and anything else in between, and besides being tired. So I just do them when I can, so forgive me if it's not the highest level of production, but I hope that at least it gives another review out there and some insight, another perspective on a watch that you may or may not be interested in, but all the same, hopefully it's a mostly positive experience. So let's go into the Lume shot. It glows green, but it's not fantastic, so I'm going to have to bump up the ISO if you can find it. And let's see, reduce the speed. Okay, there we go. And let me change the white balance a little bit so that it's not so orangey. Of course, the Lume is not that blue either. And what I gotta do, hold on, I gotta turn off the other light. That's what I gotta do. It's screwing up. Here I come. Okay. Maybe I'll do a comparison next to my Seiko. So, there. And let's see if I can change the white balance till it looks, it's probably something closer to this. Well, anyways. You can see the Seiko is definitely a bit stronger. The hands on the Glycine are not too bad. They are comparable to the Seiko, but the Seiko just definitely has a little more punch. It definitely has a thicker application of Lume as well. The indexes on the Glycine could use with a little bit more even application. I mean, I think I see subtle darker spots within it, but it's pretty minute. Overall, it's good enough. And so this is what you get at the dark GMT hand. I mean, if you were not, you can kind of guess what it is right now, right? It's going to be, it's actually, this is at 10 a.m. because the GMT is slave to the main handset. So, and I have not advanced or messed around with the GMT to be another time zone. So 10 o'clock is down here right by the 5. And then it's heading towards 11 o'clock. So 11 will be right between the 25 and the 30-minute marker, right? Or the 5 and 6 hours, depending on how you want to consider those indexes at this point. But you get the idea. So there is a chance to know what time it is, but you should know at 10 a.m. It shouldn't be this dark anyways. You shouldn't be in the dark reading the watch. But say if it was 10 p.m., then actually that arrow hand would be probably up in this corner. Sorry, my finger's trying to block where it's going to be at up there between the 11 and 12, obviously. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, it looks darker in the video, but in front of me is actually still relatively bright. I think they've done a little bit of improvement in the Lume department since like earlier on. It's still not the best, but I've definitely seen a lot worse. And this lasts overall sufficiently, I believe, throughout the night till morning, provided it's dark enough. If there's, when it's dim, it needs to be pretty dark to still be able to read it. Otherwise, the room starts to lighten up or get even a little bit brighter. Then, trying to read a dark dial where the Lume isn't, contrasty enough, I guess, will probably be harder. But overall, it does work. And so I hope that helps. Let me just switch off back to normal lighting. Okay, so to conclude, if I didn't already, this is a great watch. They come in different styles or colors, and I believe there's a Coke bezel, black and red, and there might be one with gilt. I don't know. Look at the website. I'm sure there are different versions of this. Some that are maybe even kind of bronze-like. I don't think they're truly bronze. Maybe I'm thinking about the Airmen. I'm not sure well, actually they do. Pretty sure they do make a bronze, but I don't know if it's in GMT version. It might be just a regular combat sub. But anyway, check out the Glycine website or any places, retail shops that do sell Glycine, such as off the top of my head, Nomon. They got some pretty good selection of watches, not just Glycine, but Seikos and Squalo or Squale, depending on how you want to pronounce it, but it's all the same, the watch. And a lot of other brands, and they are reliable and fast. They're one of the fastest shippers, which is great. And I never get any issues with documentation and custom works getting my stuff over here. It's just no problem. It just happens. Whereas other places, once you're following that tracking, and then all of a sudden there's a delay event or whatever, right? And it's because they didn't get the custom work, or there's a discrepancy or something, and then God forbid if they actually decide to say, okay, we're gonna tax your ass on this item because it's X amount, then that sucks to have to pay more, right? But anyways, I never had that issue with Nomon. They seem to take care of all that really perfectly. I don't know about the import tax. Maybe it's different from Singapore, but I mean, I've had pretty, stuff that where they usually charge you over $800 at least from Europe. So I'm assuming elsewhere as well. And I've had watches well over $800 from Nomon, and they pass through without issue. So, anyways, what I was saying, yeah. So you can get this close to $500-600. Look around. Definitely worth it. 800-900, maybe 1,000. No, unless you really want to watch, and for some reason they possibly have stopped making or carrying the particular model that you want. Maybe you might have to bite the bullet into it if you really like it. Personally, I don't think I would pay quite that much for one. I'm always looking for some bit of discount, or at least pay as little as I can. But yeah, I mean, this compares to a lot of watches, and they have this general style, and I did have that Manta SkyQuest that they discontinued with the last release of their limited edition with the white opaline dial. That's nice. I saw that I was going to sell this and get that and sell some other things because that watch is kind of expensive. But it's very limited edition, sold out like in 15 minutes or something. But I jumped on it as soon as it opened, and I did get a place in it. But I started thinking about it, and I changed my mind. I'm not going to get into it right now, but that was nice. It had this Pepsi white-ish style with gold accents and all that, and the quality of the watch from Manta is really good. Adjustable class, which yeah, that's something I would love if they ever do a toolless system. Which, I mean, watch bands, they should start doing that instead of these, primitive micro adjusts. People want the on-the-fly stuff. It's just adds so much more value to a watch. Even if it costs a little bit more, I think, depending on how much, I'd be willing to fork up that extra money just to get that adjustability throughout the day, anytime, anywhere. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this. I think I concluded what I need to say. It's a good buy if you can buy it for the right price. Everything else, minus the date window, I think everything else is pretty much executed quite well, and I'd recommend it. Definitely. I mean, slim. 42 is not bad size. It's just big enough, but not too big. Gives you just enough wrist presence, but still kind of slim and elegant, and that brushing just tones it down, makes it sort of tooly too, so it's not blingy. So anyways, babbling on. Enjoy this, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.